Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And it's the same. It's looking at where your beliefs come from. Why do I believe what I believe? A lot of negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, you learned them somewhere. And so if you learned them, you can unlearn them.
Welcome to Part 2, an extended conversation with Jamie and Donna Winship. If you missed our latest episode, I highly encourage you to stop right now, go back one episode, and listen to Jamie and Donna sharing about how you can learn to live fearlessly in your true identity, which involves asking God questions like, how did you make me? And what unique gifts and talents did you put into me? And how can I put those gifts and talents on display to give back to the world? What do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? So if you've been feeling lately like you're stuck in some unhealthy patterns, I am so thankful for the work of Jamie and Donna Winship to help us live fearlessly in our true identity. And that's what they talked all about in the last episode. Now, our intern, Audrey, is going to take it away on this episode because she was sitting in as we recorded the most recent one. And Audrey had some thoughts. So take it away.
So yeah, as I was saying, back at Grand Canyon University at Young Life, I've learned a lot about original design from the Lord and everything, especially with the area director, Ryan Buskirk. You guys know Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's been a leader there for a long time and director, and we've done a thing called Freedom Weekend. Are you guys familiar with that concept? So a lot of the times what we do is we sit down with this kind of booklet packet talking about this tree of life, but it's like the opposite, talking about the anger in your life and what that really stems from and all of that, and talking about the trauma that we bring up from childhood. And then we have a bunch of Young Life leaders pray over people and pray and talk about listening prayer and original design from the Lord. And I have two papers in front of me, one from the first year and then one from the second. And it just talks a lot about, so a lot of adjectives that they had for me was like creative, leader, voice of reason, speaker of truth. And I wasn't even on my track for radio at all yet. And I didn't know what they meant by that. And it was weird for me because in childhood, there was a lot of times where, since I'm the youngest child of 3, I felt like I didn't have a voice. And maybe at the dinner table, everyone would be eating and talking about their day. Then once it's my turn, everyone's done with their food. So they're just going to leave the table. And that stuck with me. And I think, I don't know if that was necessarily trauma, but it really built performance in me of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk. That's what they want me to be. But then throughout college and learning that I am a voice of reason and a speaker of truth, and that's what God sees for me. That's when I really encountered who I originally was supposed to be. And yeah, I just think it's beautiful that you guys talk about listening prayer and original design. And yeah, that's what I learned from that time at Young Life. So yeah.
That's interesting. So in how you're recounting that, I just think is fascinating. So we see this because we've prayed with so many people and worked with so many people on the issue of identity, from Uyghur Muslims in China to, students here. We just see these kind of interesting patterns in how God works in people. So in the scenario you're talking about, so you're number 3, and as number 3, you're observing something in the world that 1 and 2 don't. They don't see it, right? Yeah. Because they're not number 3. Mm-hmm. So it could be in the trauma of realizing, wow, I'm not going to get to say anything because it's all going to be over and everyone's done eating, and do I have anything worth saying? You become very sensitive to the voiceless. Like, that's what it's doing. It's building in a love and a sensitivity towards the voiceless. Yeah. And once you have that hunger and that compassion and mercy for them, you become a voice. See how that works? If you just became a voice, we know people that are a voice that you wish they weren't quite so much of a voice. But when you become a voice because you know what it feels like not to have a voice, Now your voice is mixed with compassion and humility, and knowing that there's timing to say things and not just say whatever you want. And so, it's kind of God works all things together for good. But I love when people are saying, when I was growing up, we just also had this earlier today, a person saying that the false identity that they struggled with is I am alone, and which is, obviously false. But then as soon as that person said it, I'm like, I know what your identity is going to be, right? And it was storm watcher or gatherer for those in a storm. So he's a person that grew up in a storm where he was alone. So he has huge compassion for people in difficult times in their life who are alone. So God told him, I want you to be a receiver of friends. And I mean, it just wiped him out because he couldn't think of anything more that he wanted to be, right, than the guy that's alone. It's like, do you know what it feels like to be alone? All right, I want you to stop that in the world. I want you to take that lie away from the world. So I love that. I love that process. And then also for you, like if you share that and we work together, I would always know that one of the ways I can honor you and protect you is by making sure you have a chance to say what you want to say.
Yeah.
So in that way, it makes our relationship stronger because now I know how to protect you from where the enemy might make you feel like, you don't really have a voice here. See all that beauty, and God is building it. If we took the time to say, Lord, what do you want me to know about being number 3? What do you want me to know about feeling like I don't get to talk? And then let him help you understand what that's all about, the beauty in all of that.
Yeah.
Do you have other thoughts on original design? Like we just saw how impactful just this experience was for Audrey. So have you gone through this with anyone else or for yourselves?
We've gone through that process that she's talking about that I think the Freedom Weekend did for you. And, you said something about trauma. Trauma is not the problem, although it's horrible. I'm not, diminishing that. It's your response that impacts you negatively, your response to the trauma. Because trauma's relative and impacts people differently. And 2 people can experience the same trauma, and one can see that this was terrible, but it's not who I am, and God's with me, and I'm going to move on. Where the other person who maybe experienced the exact same thing suddenly believes the lie that I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm alone, I'm helpless, I'm a victim. And then they start moving forward in that wrong belief. And so in a freedom, what you're describing as a Freedom Weekend, we have something on our Identity Exchange website called the Identity Exchange Intensive. And it's the same. It's looking at where your beliefs come from. Why do I believe what I believe? A lot of negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, you learned them somewhere. And so if you learned them, you can unlearn them. And maybe when I was 7 years old and the teacher embarrassed me in front of the class and I took on this shame and humiliation, I didn't know God was with me. But I can revisit that memory and let God interpret it for me. And when I have that experience of hearing what it is that God wants me to know, then I'm able to forgive the teacher and even forgive myself for how, I reacted to the situation. And that's what frees you. Again, it comes back to having an experiential encounter with the living God. That is what changes us. Not reading how to do it in a book, or, we just consume information, but information doesn't lead to transformation. And the key is really forgiveness. I don't know how much in the Freedom Weekend they talk about that, but that's one of the number one keys. We teach people what forgiveness really means. Most people think it means saying you're sorry, right? But I'm curious how that impacted you, Audrey.
Yeah. So I think a big part of it was learning from that booklet almost of the tree, and a lot of it was talking about like, there's sadness, shame, fear, like, the big troubles of life. And everyone there's like branches that like go even more in depth and everything. And I think for me, it was probably like shame of just being scared that I'm going to say something that people aren't going to approve of, or I'm going to be judged for some reason. And so it was just cool to see that like on that tree, like God did not ever want that to be a problem for us. And that is so like from the flesh and not from God. And so going through the original design and talking about who God really made us to be is so beautiful. And how you guys were saying earlier, about how the image of God is like there's parts of him within us and how we're all unique in that way. And so seeing the original design that people have prayed over me for, and 2 separate years, by the way, they like separately, they've said the voice of reason, and that like they also said like that I'd be a voice with people twice my age, the voice of authority. That was in early 2022 when I was a freshman in college, and I had no idea what I was thinking for my life. And I do believe the next month, that's when I texted or called Sarah about maybe an internship up here. And so I just think it's so cool looking back on these papers and Freedom Weekend and seeing how that developed. But also I do remember they had a couple prayer sessions. I think the second prayer session, they really worked on praying and hearing from the Lord, like forgiveness and saying like, hey, like, what happened in your life before, like you're born again now, and the sanctification process should involve original design. And instead of bringing the trauma from your past life in, bringing the new and bringing the original design, the tree of life rather than the tree of death, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
and staying connected to the tree of life and not plugging into that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where you are your own source. You're trying to figure out what makes me good. How can I avoid bad?
Yep.
But staying plugged into God and hearing his voice. I love that, the voice of reason, because again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you hear his voice.
Yeah.
And so then you're able to voice what that is. It's just like Jesus saying, I can hear what the Father is saying and say it.
Yep.
That's a beautiful identity.
And I love how you took the step to for this internship. I mean, you didn't go get a job where no one sees you or you don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you took a step of faith and of obedience to put yourself in a position to like walk this out. It's one thing to hear the Lord. It's like Israel going all the way up to the promised land and never going in. Like they were, you're a nation, you're a priesthood. We're going to be the nation that influences other nations. Yeah. And they get all the way there and then they won't go in. And so, I respect you for taking a step of obedience.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd miss the voice of reason, right?
Yeah. That's
We'd
right.
know you were out there somewhere, but we wouldn't know where.
Exactly. And when I first heard that original design, that's when I really like, it clicked for me like, okay, what does this mean? Like, what do I need to do now in that vocation and everything? And I took it pretty literally going to radio, but so that was just funny. But
I'm sure there's many levels of how you're going to be the voice of reason. But you start where you can start with people that can help you do it and encourage you, like this situation right here. And then just while you're young, watch where the Lord. You don't even ask him where he's going to take you. You won't want to know. You will not want to know. It'll scare you to death.
Just do the right next thing, and this is it.
We're 64, and I'm afraid. So I'm afraid I'm like, where else can we go?
Totally.
Yeah. So that's exciting, though.
Yeah.
You guys, what a gift it is just to be able to observe this today. Thank you so much, Audrey. You're welcome to take over the podcast anytime.
There you go. Promotion.
Jamie and Donna, thank you. We're going to link up to all of your incredible resources in the show notes. I really appreciate you both sticking around for 2 episodes. Thank you for the teaching that you do. It's exciting. It makes me excited as a mom to share this with my kids. And I just wish you both just all of the best.
Yeah,
Thank you.
God
Thanks
bless
for
you.
having-
Thanks for having us. It's a real joy to be with you.